Our first guest today is someone who has the responsibility of coordinating and leading those who take music seriously well into the life of the community. And through the Conservatorium of Music in Newcastle, Mr. Michael Dudman, the principal, is with us to discuss those aspects of our cultural heritage, I guess we might say, of the Hunter Valley, because it does go back a long while, doesn't it, music? I mean, you could go back to the settlers, original settlers, I guess.
Yes, indeed.
Yes. Now, you are, shall we say, a principal who is also a musician. And I often wonder in those sort of senior appointments, like a plumber who has to take over a factory, how do you get on being a musician and also an administrator?
Well, I hope it'll be possible to remain a performer. To me, music's always been a very practical thing. It's something that you do, something in which you're involved, and I'd like very much to keep it that way. I don't want to be purely an administrator.
Well, that's good. I mean, for the sake of the talent to come, that's a good point of view, I guess. As an organist for the Christchurch Cathedral, which is really your background, isn't it? 12
Yes.
years as organist. And you've made 6 LPs. How would you rate the Christchurch Cathedral organ in Newcastle before we start talking about the Conservatorium?
It's a marvellous instrument. It's one of the best all-purpose instruments in the country. To be just a little technical, it's probably the finest romantic organ in the country, and certainly if one had to pick an instrument anywhere in Australia and say, oh, which one would I like to give a concert on, that would come very high on the list indeed.
Really? Well, you use the expression romantic organ. What does that mean in relationship to, say, the Sydney Town Hall or the Opera House?
The Opera House is a more classical organ, much more suitable for playing the music, say, of Bach and for music of the 18th century generally, but the Town Hall and the Cathedral organ here are more suitable for 19th century music and for modern music too.
Oh, really? The other thing that fascinated me about your background, Michael, was the term Master of Choristers, which you had at the Christchurch Cathedral, at the boys' choir. And I've always wondered, I mean, I understand the musical notes, crotchets and quavers, but always wondered why boys made principal church choirs.
Sure. Well, as for the title Master of the Choristers, it's rather pompous, rather stuffy, you know, and it belongs to a different age. It's not one that of which I care to be reminded very often. The reason for using boys' voices is simply that the sound they produce after training is more suitable for that sort of music. It sounds better, and that's why we do it.
Yeah, I guess you've got 1,000 stories about boys' voices breaking at the wrong recital. Sure,
it's a sort of high risk situation, and you try and guard against the risks by feeding in at the lower end of the choir young children who will come through the ranks and compensate that way. But it's always possible to miscalculate because you can't tell when their voices are going to break.
The role as principal of the Conservatorium of Music now, I guess, as a layman, that each principal brings a certain philosophy with him. What do you want to see for music in the Hunter Valley?
Well, I'd like to see the Conservatorium continue or become even more part of the valley. I think the worst thing that a conservatorium or that any performing or educational institution can be is a sort of hothouse institution which is remote from the area in which it is. And so I would like the people in the valley and in Newcastle to look upon it as their conservatorium and as a place which will offer guidance and help and tuition and to establish incentives, musical incentives in the area.
Well, how do we do that, Michael? After all, it's a building. It's got front doors and windows. I mean, how do you really get it out amongst the people?
I think we'll begin by encouraging the students and the staff to give concerts and recitals throughout the area and share music with the people in that way. After all, musical ability is a gift, and it's something which ought to be shared and not to be kept rather selfishly to oneself.
All right. So it becomes I hate to use the term, but a travelling conservatorium. People know what I mean. Your students will be seen.
Sure.
Yes.
I think that's necessary.
That's good. And what about the talent in the Hunter Valley? Obviously, we are supporting a conservatorium of music, but on any particular scale that you have in mind, I mean, how do we rate?
I think that the people of the Hunter Valley have great musical talent. It's always been an area that's produced fine musicians, orchestral players, pianists and singers, and many of these musicians are to be found in other parts of the country and overseas now, and there's every indication that that's going to continue.
And of course you're looking forward, I guess, to a boom time because you've just acquired new premises. How will that affect the work?
It's a very exciting time. Through the generosity of the state government, we've acquired the old Salvation Army building, the former People's Palace building near the city square there, This is going to be renovated, and in due time we'll take up our residence there. Both the students and the staff are quite excited at the prospect, as you can imagine, so it all looks very rosy.
We've discussed about the conservatorium going out to meet the people, but I'm wondering if a moment you could take our viewers into the conservatorium, Michael. You know, what is inside a conservatorium, apart from a few little studios? How does the whole thing operate?
Sure. It provides a service at 2 or 3 different levels. First of all, there are the people we call single study students, people from Newcastle and from further afield who come and study perhaps singing or piano, organ, violin, and who have no further connection with the place after that. Then we have our full-time students, and they divide into 2 streams: the Diploma of Music Education students, who are later going on into secondary schools to teach music themselves, right, and people who have more of an interest in the actual business of performing and who'd attempt the Conservatorium Performers Diploma, which is a very high performing qualification. We deal with those people not only with the physical problems of playing an instrument or of singing, but we teach them all sorts of academic skills and backgrounds beside, in an attempt to make them all-round, well-equipped musicians.
I wouldn't want, well, certainly not knowingly, want to destroy your status as principal amongst the other students, but I've got to register the fact that you are a family man with a young growing family, and I wonder then about your own musical interests, Michael. I mean, the pressures that are going to come on you, I guess, as you go, the family rises through teenagers, right through. Have you got a mind to represent all kinds of music?
I guess so. I think one of the nice things that's happened in people's view of music over the last generation, especially over the last 10 years, is that we no longer have the rather silly notion that there is good music and bad music, that there is classical music and pop music, and that there's a dividing line between them that can't be crossed. I can remember in its most extreme view, this even carried with it certain social attitudes, so that these sort of people liked classical music and those sort of people of whom one rather disapproved like popular music. All that is I hope, going now, and it's possible to see that they are just different aspects of the same sort of thing. I don't mean by that to say that there are no such things as good music and bad music, because technique in art is measurable, but it would be a very foolish view indeed, I think, to divide things into watertight compartments and to strike attitudes about them. And so if people can come to a love of music through, first of all, a love of commercial music, then why not?
Yes, I guess we've both seen people yawn at symphony concerts, haven't we? I mean, music has got to be something that hits you, the emotive side of the personality, isn't it?
Sure, and I think that music educators have themselves at least to blame to a certain extent for this boredom, because there's a great deal of rather pretentious nonsense spoken about serious music that at times seems to put it outside the understanding of people without perhaps a specialist background, and it shouldn't be like that. It should be something which is available to everybody.
Well, I guess, I gather from what you're saying today anyway, as principal of the Conservatorium of Music, that one, you want music to be taken to the people in the Valley, and you plan to do so.
Indeed, yes.
Secondly, that your own philosophy of music is that there is good and bad in all forms, and therefore you have a fairly liberal attitude to the Conservatorium's approach to music.
I think we must do this. After all, the Conservatorium is located here to cater to the musical needs and developments of the region, and we must be very Catholic, I think, in our approach to the whole problem.
Right. Michael Dudman, thank you for appearing on today's program.
Thank you.